The blood trail led directly to Garrison Holloway's front porch. He stood frozen in the pre-dawn darkness, steam rising from his coffee mug as his eyes followed the crimson drops that wound through the sagebrush and disappeared behind his barn. 23 years had passed since he'd last seen blood scattered like breadcrumbs across hostile terrain, but his body remembered muscles tensing, breath shallowing, hand instinctively reaching for a sidearm that no longer hung at his hip. The Wyoming wind carried the scent of copper and fear. Garrison set his mug on the weathered porch rail and grabbed the shotgun from beside his door. His prosthetic left leg clicked against the wooden steps as he descended, a rhythmic reminder of the IED that had ended his military career and begun his exile to this remote ranch. The morning star Venus still hung in the violet sky, casting long shadows across his modest spread of cattle and endless grassland. He found the horse behind the barn, collapsed against a stack of hay bales. The animal was magnificent despite its condition, a paint mare with white and chestnut patches, her coat matted with sweat and blood. A deep gash ran along her right flank, probably from barbed wire, and her breathing came in labored gasps, but it was her eyes that stopped Garrison cold. They held the same hollow, haunted look he'd seen in mirrors for 2 decades. "Easy, girl," he murmured, approaching slowly. "You're safe now." The mare flinched but didn't flee. She watched him with desperate intelligence as he knelt beside her, his practiced hands assessing the wound. The cut was clean but deep, requiring immediate attention. He'd treated enough wounded soldiers to know when time was running out. As he worked to clean and bandage the injury, Garrison noticed something that made his blood run cold. Carved into the mare's left shoulder was a brand he recognized, not from his ranching days, but from classified briefings in a military compound half a world away. The symbol was simple, 3 interlocking circles with a slash through the center. It was the mark of the Crimson Collective, a mercenary group he'd encountered during his final deployment in Syria. The same mercenaries who had planted the bomb that claimed his leg and 3 of his best men. Garrison's hands trembled as he secured the bandage. This couldn't be coincidence. The collective didn't operate in Wyoming. They were ghosts, hired killers who worked in war zones and failed states. Unless the mare whinnied softly, breaking his spiraling thoughts. Her dark eyes seemed to plead with him, and he felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Whatever connection this animal had to his past, she was injured and afraid. He understood both conditions intimately. "All right, girl," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Let's get you inside." It took considerable effort to help the mare to her feet and guide her into the barn. She moved carefully, favoring her injured side, but showed remarkable trust for a wild animal as Garrison settled her in a clean stall with fresh water and feed. He tried to convince himself that the brand meant nothing. Perhaps someone had stolen the horse from the collective. Perhaps it was all an elaborate coincidence, but deep in his gut, the place where 20 years of combat experience lived, Garrison knew better. The war he'd tried so hard to leave behind had found him, and this wounded horse was just the beginning. The sun crested the mountains as he stood in the barn doorway, watching the mare rest. For the first time in years, Garrison Holloway felt like a soldier again. The question was, would that be enough to survive what was coming? The phone call came at 3 in the morning. Garrison jolted awake to the shrill ringing, his hand reflexively reaching for a weapon before his mind caught up with his location. He was in his bedroom, not a forward operating base. The only enemy here was insomnia and the phantom pain in his missing leg. He grabbed the cordless phone from his nightstand, expecting a wrong number or emergency call about livestock. Holloway. His voice was gravelly with sleep and caution. Silence stretched across the connection, broken only by the faint static of a long-distance call. Then, a voice he'd hoped never to hear again spoke through the darkness. "Hello, Captain. Miss me?" Garrison's blood turned to ice water. The accent was slight Eastern European, carefully cultured to mask its origins. He'd last heard it in a bombed-out building in Aleppo, moments before the world exploded around him. Dmitry Kozlov. Garrison said, sitting up straighter. The name tasted like ash in his mouth. "Very good. Your memory remains sharp despite your retirement." Kozlov's laugh was soft and poisonous. I trust you found my calling card, the mayor. Garrison's gaze drifted toward the window facing the barn. What do you want? What I've always wanted, my friend. Justice, balance. You cost me a great deal in Syria, $3 million in contracted fees. When your interference disrupted my operations. Plus interest, of course. Garrison remembered that night clearly. The Crimson Collective had been hired to eliminate a group of journalists investigating war crimes. Instead of following orders, Garrison had warned the reporters and helped them escape. The mission had gone sideways, Kozlov's team scattered, and 2 weeks later the IED had taken Garrison's leg and nearly his life. That was a long time ago, Garrison said, moving carefully to his bedroom window. The barn stood dark and silent 100 yards away. Time is irrelevant to men like us. We are defined by our choices. Captain, you chose to interfere with my business. I chose to remember. Kozlov paused. The horse was a gift. Consider it a demonstration of how easily I can reach you, even in your fortress of solitude. Garrison scanned the darkness beyond his property line, looking for the telltale glint of scoped rifles or the heat shimmer of hidden vehicles. His ranch bordered thousands of acres of federal wilderness, perfect terrain for an approach. If you wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. Death would be too simple, too clean. Kozlov's voice carried the weight of old hatred. You have built something here, haven't you? A new life, peace, purpose. I want you to understand what it means to lose everything. As you cost me everything. The line went dead. Garrison stood, motionless for several minutes, processing the threat and calculating options. Kozlov wasn't bluffing. The Crimson Collective specialized in psychological warfare, as much as physical violence. The wounded horse had been bait and warning combined. They wanted him afraid, paranoid, making mistakes. He limped to his closet and began pulling out gear he hadn't touched in years. Body armor, night vision goggles, a secure satellite communicator he'd kept for emergencies, his service pistol, cleaned and maintained despite his retirement. The familiar weight of military equipment felt both comfortable and terrifying. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance. Garrison made 3 phone calls in rapid succession. The first was to his closest neighbor, Beaumont Nash, a Vietnam veteran, who lived 15 miles south. The second was to the sheriff's department, though he knew local law enforcement would be useless against professional mercenaries. The third call went to a contact at the Pentagon, someone who owed him favors and had access to military resources. As dawn approached, he walked to the barn to check on the mayor. She was standing now, her wound showing signs of healing. She nickered softly when he approached, as if recognizing him as an ally. Garrison found himself drawn to her calm strength, the way she endured pain without complaint. You and I are more alike than I thought, he murmured, stroking her neck. Both of us carrying scars from other people's wars. The mayor nuzzled his shoulder, and for a moment, Garrison felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine connection, not just with the animal, but with the part of himself he'd buried along with his uniform. The part that protected the innocent and stood against predators. Kozlov wanted a war. Perhaps it was time. Garrison remembered how to fight. But first, he needed to understand exactly what he was up against. And that meant the wounded horse held more secrets than her brand. The veterinarian arrived at sunrise, driving a battered pickup truck that had seen better decades. Dr. Cordelia Marsh was a woman, in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and hands steady enough to perform surgery in a hurricane. She'd been treating Garrison's cattle for 8 years, and more importantly, she asked no questions about the unusual circumstances surrounding late-night emergency calls. Hell of a thing, she said, examining the mare's flank. This isn't from barbed wire to clean to precise. Someone cut this animal deliberately. Garrison had suspected as much. How long ago? Judging by the healing pattern and infection level, maybe 4 or 5 days. She's been running hard. Look at these hooves, worn down to nothing. This horse traveled a long way to find you, or someone drove her here and turned her loose nearby. Garrison said, thinking of Kozlov's meticulous planning. Cordelia administered antibiotics and pain medication, while Garrison studied the mare's other markings. beyond the Crimson Collective brand. He found evidence of expert care, perfect hoof trimming, premium feed conditioning, professional training. This wasn't some random ranch animal. She'd been valuable to someone. One more thing, Cordelia said as she packed her equipment. This horse has been microchipped. High-end system. Military grade. Might want to have someone run the serial number. After the veterinarian left, Garrison spent the morning fortifying his property. He activated motion sensors he'd installed, but never used, positioned cameras at strategic points, and established clear fields of fire from his house to the property boundaries. His military training kicked in, automatically assessed terrain, identify choke points, prepare defensive positions. Around noon, Beaumont Nash arrived in a cloud of dust and diesel exhaust. The old Marine climbed out of his truck carrying a rifle case and wearing the same grim expression he'd worn in the jungles of Southeast Asia 40 years earlier. "So we got company coming," Beaumont said without preamble. He was 73, but still moved like a younger man, all compact muscle and coiled energy. "Looks that way. You don't have to get involved in this, Beau," Beaumont snorted. "Like hell. You think I'm gonna let some foreign assholes run roughshod over my neighbors? Besides, I've been bored lately. Retirement's overrated." They spent the afternoon reviewing defensive strategies and coordinating communication protocols. Beaumont would position himself on a ridge overlooking the main access road, while Garrison held the ranch itself. If the Crimson Collective came in force, their goal would be to channel the attackers into predetermined killing zones. Late in the day, Garrison's Pentagon contact called back with disturbing news. That microchip serial number came back flagged. Colonel von Kessler said over the encrypted satellite phone, "The horse belongs to a CIA asset who went dark 3 weeks ago in Kazakhstan." Dr. Lysander Voss, a biochemist working on defensive applications for biological weapons. Garrison felt the pieces clicking into place. "Let me guess, Voss hired the Crimson Collective for protection. That's classified. But let's say certain private security contractors were involved in his extraction from a compromised research facility. The operation went sideways. Voss disappeared along with his research data and several biological samples. That could be weaponized if they fell into the wrong hands. And now Kozlov thinks I have whatever Voss was carrying. It's possible Voss programmed the horse to find you specifically. The animal's GPS tracking shows it traveled over 600 miles in the past week, moving at night and avoiding populated areas. That's not random behavior, Garrison. Someone trained it to find your ranch." After the call ended, Garrison walked back to the barn where the mare waited. She watched him approach with those intelligent eyes, and he wondered what secrets lay locked in her memory. Had she witnessed Dr. Voss's disappearance? Did she carry some hidden message or device? "What did you see, girl?" he asked softly. "What really happened out there?" The mare whinnied and stamped her foot against the stall floor. Not randomly 3 times, pause, 2 times, pause, 3 times again. Morse code. SOS. Garrison's pulse quickened. He'd underestimated the situation completely. This wasn't just about Kozlov's revenge. The wounded horse wasn't bait, she was a messenger, and somewhere out in the darkness, the Crimson Collective was hunting for both of them, along with whatever Dr. Lysander Voss had died trying to protect. The war was about to begin, and Garrison still didn't understand what they were really fighting for. The first attack came at midnight, and it wasn't what Garrison expected. Instead of armed mercenaries, he faced something far more insidious: complete electronic warfare. His power went out first, followed by his landline, satellite internet, and cell service. The motion sensors fell silent, and his security cameras displayed nothing but static. In the span of 3 minutes, the Crimson Collective had isolated him from the outside world. Garrison switched to backup systems, solar batteries, ham radio, and night vision equipment that didn't depend on external networks. Through his bedroom window, he could see muzzle flashes on the ridge where Beaumont had positioned himself. His neighbor was engaging targets, but without communication. Garrison couldn't coordinate their defense. The mare was restless, pacing her stall and whinnying softly. Her behavior suggested she sensed danger beyond what Garrison could detect. He decided to trust her instincts and moved the horse into his house. through the mudroom an awkward process, but the thick log walls would provide better protection than the barn. At 12:47 a.m., his motion detectors, the hardened military ones, detected movement near the eastern fence line. Multiple contacts, moving with tactical precision. Garrison counted at least 8 heat signatures through his thermal scope, all carrying professional equipment and advancing in coordinated teams. But they weren't approaching the house directly. Instead, they were setting up a perimeter. The realization hit him like ice water. They weren't here to kill him. They were here to contain him while they searched for whatever Dr. Voss had hidden. The biological weapons research. The missing samples. Kozlov believed Garrison had them, or knew where they were. A new sound reached his ears. Helicopters. Not one, but several, approaching from different directions. The Crimson Collective was deploying significant resources for this operation. Whatever Voss had been working on, it was worth a fortune on the black market. Garrison grabbed his service weapon and moved to check on the mare. She stood in his living room, somehow managing to look both majestic and absurd among his simple furniture. But her eyes held recognition when she saw him, and she moved closer, pressing her muzzle against his shoulder. "You know something, don't you?" he whispered. "Voss left you a message." The mare turned toward his computer desk and nickered softly. Garrison followed her gaze and noticed something he'd missed earlier. She was staring directly at his ham radio equipment, the same equipment Dr. Voss would have used if he'd been trying to send an encrypted message to a military contact. Garrison powered up the radio with battery backup and began scanning emergency frequencies. Most channels carried only static, but on 14.20 MHz, a frequency used for military emergency broadcasts, he found something different. A repeating digital signal, faint but persistent. The transmission was encrypted, but Garrison recognized the format from his intelligence days. It was a dead drop protocol, designed to hide data in seemingly random radio noise. Someone had been broadcasting this message continuously for weeks, waiting for the right person to decode it. Outside, the helicopter's sounds grew closer. Garrison estimated he had maybe 10 minutes before they completed their encirclement. He needed to extract whatever information Voss had hidden and decide whether to fight or run. The mare moved to stand beside him as he worked, her presence oddly comforting. She seemed to understand the urgency of the situation. When Garrison's decryption software finally broke through the encryption, the message that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. Crimson Collective compromised. Stolen bioweapon. Project Hydra. Contains enhanced anthrax strain. Weaponized for aerosol deployment. Samples hidden. Coordinates 40 to .858 for N. 106.3139. W. Trust nitrogen monoxide 1. Voss. Garrison checked the coordinates on his GPS. They pointed to a location 15 miles northwest of his ranch, in the Bridger Teton National Forest. Dr. Voss had hidden biological weapons in the wilderness, and the Crimson Collective would stop at nothing to retrieve them. The sound of rotors filled the air as the first helicopter descended toward his pasture. Garrison grabbed his emergency pack, ensured the mare could follow him, and opened the back door of his house. If Kozlov wanted a hunt through the Wyoming wilderness, that's exactly what he'd get. But first, Garrison had to reach those coordinates before the mercenaries realized what they were really searching for. The fate of thousands, maybe millions of innocent people, depended on keeping Project Hydra out of terrorist hands. The mare seemed to understand their destination. As they slipped into the darkness behind his house, she moved with purpose and intelligence, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Together, they disappeared into the forest, racing against time and an enemy that had already proven they would kill anyone who stood in their way. Behind them, the Crimson Collective began their systematic destruction of everything Garrison had built. But ahead lay something far more dangerous, the deadliest biological weapon ever created. Hidden somewhere in the vast Wyoming wilderness, they traveled through the night, following game trails and creek beds that wouldn't show their passage. To tracking dogs, the mare moved with surprising grace despite her injury, picking her way carefully through deadfall and rocky terrain. Garrison began to understand that her training went far beyond simple riding. She'd been conditioned for wilderness survival, and evasion. By dawn, they'd covered 12 miles toward the coordinates from Voss's message. Garrison called a halt near a natural spring where they could rest and plan their next move. The mayor drank gratefully while he studied topographical maps and tried to raise Beaumont. On his emergency radio, static filled the airwaves. Either his neighbor was maintaining radio silence or something worse had happened on the ridge. As the sun climbed higher, Garrison noticed fresh helicopter tracks in the muddy ground near the spring. The Crimson Collective was already searching the forest, probably using thermal imaging and electronic surveillance to locate their quarry. He had maybe an hour before the search pattern reached their position. "Time to go, girl," he said. Shouldering his pack, the mare nickered and moved close to him, then did something unexpected. She knelt down beside a fallen log and looked back at him meaningfully. Garrison realized she was offering to carry him. His prosthetic leg was slowing their progress. "Through the rough terrain, I don't think that's," he began, then stopped. Her eyes held the same intelligence he'd seen in his best soldiers, the ones who understood mission priorities even when orders seemed impossible. The mare knew they were running out of time. Garrison climbed awkwardly onto her back, and she rose smoothly to her feet. The difference in speed was immediate and dramatic. Instead of struggling through underbrush and over fallen trees, they began covering ground like a cavalry unit, the mare's hooves finding secure footing on terrain that would have challenged an experienced hiker. As they rode, Garrison began to piece together the larger picture. Dr. Lysander Voss hadn't just been a biochemist, he'd been a military contractor, working on defensive systems against biological weapons. Project Hydra was supposed to be a vaccine or treatment, not a weapon itself. But somewhere in the development process, the research had been corrupted. The Crimson Collective hadn't stolen the samples from Voss. They'd been hired to steal them from someone else, probably a rival government or terrorist organization. When the operation went wrong and Voss disappeared with the materials, Kozlov found himself caught between his employers and the most dangerous biological agent ever created, which meant the mercenaries weren't just hunting Garrison for revenge. They were hunting him because they thought he could lead them to a weapon worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the international black market. At 10:30 a.m., they reached the coordinates from Voss's message. The location was unremarkable, a small clearing beside a seasonal creek, surrounded by lodgepole pine and aspen trees. Garrison dismounted and began searching for signs of disturbance or hidden caches. The mare wandered the clearing, sniffing the ground with obvious purpose. She stopped beside a cluster of boulders and began pawing at the earth. Garrison joined her and discovered that the rocks weren't natural, they'd been carefully arranged to hide an underground storage container. When he moved the stones aside, a metal hatch was revealed, secured with both a combination lock and a biometric scanner. The scanner was military grade, designed to read fingerprints and retinal patterns. But as Garrison examined it more closely, he realized it had been modified. Instead of human biometrics, it was configured to scan something else entirely. "Son of a bitch," he whispered, understanding flooding through him. He didn't hide the samples, he hid them in you. The mare stood perfectly still as Garrison approached her branded shoulder. The Crimson Collective symbol wasn't just a mark of ownership. It was a sophisticated storage device. Hidden beneath the surface scarification was a data chip, containing the complete research files for Project Hydra, encrypted with biometric locks that could only be opened by scanning the mare's DNA patterns. Dr. Voss had turned his horse into a living vault. The implications were staggering. The Crimson Collective could search forever and never find what they were looking for, because the weapons specifications weren't hidden in any physical location. They were embedded in the animal's flesh, protected by layers of encryption that would self-destruct if tampered with incorrectly. Garrison activated the scanner and guided the mare's branded shoulder into position. The device hummed softly, reading genetic markers and verifying authentication protocols. After several tense moments, the underground hatch clicked open. Inside the container, he found not biological samples, but something else entirely, a complete dossier on the Crimson Collective's operations, including client lists, financial records, and detailed evidence of war crimes committed across 3 continents. Dr. Voss had been more than a scientist, he'd been an intelligence asset, gathering evidence to dismantle one of the world's most dangerous mercenary organizations. The biological weapons had been a cover story. The real prize was information that could destroy Kozlov's entire network. As Garrison studied the files, he heard a sound that made his heart sink. Helicopter rotors. Approaching fast, the Crimson Collective had found them, but now he understood the game they were really playing, and he finally knew how to win it. The helicopter crested the ridge at 11:15 a.m., its rotor wash bending trees and scattering debris across the clearing. Garrison had exactly 90 seconds to prepare for what might be his final battle, but this time, he held all the cards. He pulled the most critical files from Voss's dossier and uploaded them to his satellite communicator, creating multiple backup transmissions to military intelligence, FBI counterterrorism, and international law enforcement agencies. If he died here, the evidence would still surface. Kozlov's empire would crumble regardless of the outcome. The mare stood calmly beside him, showing no fear despite the approaching aircraft. Her training had prepared her for combat situations, and she seemed to understand that everything depended on the next few minutes. "This is Colonel Dmitry Kozlov." A voice called through helicopter-mounted speakers. "You are surrounded, Captain Holloway. Surrender the research materials and you will be allowed to live." Garrison keyed his radio to an open emergency frequency and spoke loudly enough for the helicopter's surveillance equipment to pick up his words. "This is former Captain Garrison Holloway. I am being attacked by international terrorists seeking to acquire biological weapons. My coordinates are 40 to .858 for north, 106.3139 west. I am requesting immediate military assistance." The helicopter settled into a landing position 50 meters away, and 6 armed mercenaries deployed in tactical formation. Garrison recognized Kozlov, immediately a lean man with silver hair and the dead eyes of someone who'd killed too many people to remember their faces. "Your radio calls me nothing here," Kozlov said, approaching with casual confidence. "We have jammed all communications for 50 miles. No one is coming to help you. You're right." Garrison replied, "No one's coming, because I already sent what you're looking for." He held up his satellite communicator, showing the transmission log. 37 files uploaded to 7 different agencies in 4 countries. Your client lists, financial records, operational details, and evidence of war crimes dating back 15 years. By now, your organization is being dismantled from the inside. Kozlov's composure cracked slightly. "Bluff, you have no way to verify. Transmission success. Try me." Garrison gestured to the mare standing beside him. Dr. Voss was brilliant. He didn't hide biological weapons, he created the perfect intelligence operation. Every transaction you've made, every client you've served, every innocent person you've murdered. It's all documented, and now it's all public. The mercenary leader raised his weapon, but hesitated. If Garrison was telling the truth, killing him would accomplish nothing except satisfying personal revenge. The damage was already done. That moment of hesitation saved both their lives. The first rifle shot came from the ridge above the clearing, taking out one of Kozlov's men before the crack of gunfire reached them. Beaumont Nash had survived the night and followed their trail through the forest. The old Marine's marksmanship remained lethal after for decades. Chaos erupted as Kozlov's team scattered for cover, returning fire toward the ridgeline. The helicopter pilot spun up his rotors, preparing for immediate extraction. In the confusion, Garrison grabbed the mare's mane and swung onto her back. "Go!" he shouted. The mare exploded into motion, charging directly through the line of mercenaries. Her hooves struck one man down while Garrison fired his sidearm at others. They crashed through the underbrush and into the forest beyond, leaving the Crimson Collective's forces confused and exposed to Beaumont's sniper fire. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, Garrison heard additional helicopters approaching, but these came from the south, flying in military formation. His transmission had reached the right people after all, whatever jamming equipment Kozlov had deployed couldn't block military-grade satellite communications. The mayor carried him to safety on a distant ridge, where they watched the forest clearing fill with federal agents and special operations troops. The Crimson Collective's extraction helicopter was forced down by military interceptors, and Kozlov's surviving mercenaries were taken into custody without further resistance. 6 months later, Garrison stood in the same clearing, watching construction. Crews dismantled the temporary command post that had coordinated the largest international manhunt. In recent memory, the evidence from Dr. Voss's files had led to arrests on 4 continents and the seizure of assets, worth over $100 million. The mare whom he'd finally named Liberty grazed peacefully nearby, her wound completely healed. The biometric storage device had been safely removed by military technicians, but she seemed content to remain on his ranch. Perhaps she'd found the same peace in Wyoming that had drawn Garrison there years earlier. Beaumont approached from the tree, Line carrying his rifle and grinning like a teenager who just won a football game. "Hell of a thing," the old Marine said. 20 years of retirement, and we end up right back in the war business. "Not war," Garrison replied, scratching Liberty behind the ears. "Justice. Sometimes they're the same thing." As the sun set over the Wyoming mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Garrison felt something he hadn't experienced since before the IED took his leg: complete peace. The ghosts of his past were finally laid to rest, and the future stretched ahead like an open trail. Liberty nickered softly and nuzzled his shoulder, ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. Some wars never truly end, but sometimes they lead to something better than victory. They lead to redemption.